Hi everybody, it's Chris and welcome back to another video. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I want to talk about live versions and whether or not there are some songs that are better known for their live versions than their studio versions. Now this album, Made in Japan by Deep Purple, which I think is the greatest live album of all time, and I think the songs that are on this album have never been played better. Does that make them the definitive versions of those songs? Possibly. Now on this album at Fillmore East, the Allman Brothers, which I think again is one of the greatest live albums of all time, the musicianship on this is absolutely top notch. The communication between the band is telepathic. It's unbelievable. Is this the best that these songs have ever been played? States for a Blues, You Don't Love Me, Whipping Post, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed. Do you think of these versions of the songs when you think about the title of those songs? Now, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, I really like the version on this album, a latter day Allman Brothers album. It's a much jazzier album. It doesn't have Duane Allman, it just has Dickie Betts. And the version of In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, which is a Dickie Betts song, is just brilliant. When I think about Thin Lizzy songs, I'm thinking about the versions probably on Live and Dangerous. I think these are the definitive versions, although there are lots of other concerts that have surfaced in latter years which are really, really good versions of those songs. But when I think about Thin Lizzy and particular songs, I'm thinking about these versions of it. And certainly when I think about a song like Rosalie, well, that was a live song and probably everyone knows that version of it as opposed to the version that kicks off the album Fighting. Now, the other day I was playing this album. So this is a triple album. This is the soundtrack from the film Woodstock. And there's a few songs on here that I think are definitive versions of these particular songs. So the first one that springs to mind is Country Joe and the Fish. And the Fish cheer, I feel like I'm fixing to die rag. Now, that particular track appears as the opening song on this album, where it starts off with give me an F, give me an I, give me an S, give me an H. And it's good. But on the live version, when he starts off with give me a F, give me a U, give me a C, and so on, it's just brilliant. And when I think about that song, I think about the version on here. When I think about Soul Sacrifice by Santana, which is also obviously on the Woodstock album, I probably don't think about the song that closes this particular album, their debut album, which is just brilliant. I think about the version that's on the Woodstock. Not that I necessarily prefer it, because I'm not a massive fan of drum solos, although Michael Shreve's work on the live version is amazing. This version doesn't contain the drum solo, but I think when people think about Soul Sacrifice, they think about that amazing performance at Woodstock from Santana. A couple of other songs on here, With a Little Help from My Friends by Joe Cocker. Yes, it was a studio version. There was a studio version, but the live version on here, which is obviously much longer, is just a definitive version. And the other song on here, which I think is the highlight of this particular album, is I'm Going Home by 10 Years After. Now, I don't think they ever recorded that in the studio. I don't think a studio version. It certainly doesn't appear on any albums other than Undead, which is a live album. So there is a live version before Woodstock. It's not as good, it's shorter, and I think the definitive version is on the Woodstock album. And every time I think people think of I'm Going Home, they think of that version. Now, there are some songs that are just live songs and never were recorded in the studio. I'm pretty sure that Crossroads by Cream was never recorded in the studio. Robert Johnson's song, an amazing version of that with just brilliant guitar work from Eric Clapton on it, absolutely fantastic. MC5, Kick Out the Jams, I don't think that was ever done in the studio. This was, is this their debut album? You know, a live album as a debut is unusual, but Kick Out the Jams, the second song on the album, just tremendous, and everyone knows it for the live version. And of course, I think the best example of maybe the only a song that's only ever been recorded live and been a hit is Silver Machine by Hawkwind, recorded at the Roundhouse in 1973. Absolutely brilliant single. Other songs that come to mind when I think about, is the live version the definitive version? Is it the best version? Is it the version everyone thinks about when they think about a particular song? For me, and this is just probably a personal one, but Kill the King by Rainbow, which came out as a live version a year or so before the studio version came out, is for me the definitive version. So this was recorded in 76, brought out as part of the album On Stage and a single in 77. Didn't come out as a studio version until 1978 and Long Live Rock and Roll, but this is the best version of it. And when I think about that song, I think about that version. And I think when everyone thinks about No Woman, No Cry, they don't think about the 3-4 minute song that's on Natty Dread with the drum machine. They think about the 7-minute live version on this particular album by Bob Marley, where we've just got, it's not very reggae, but it's just an absolutely beautiful song. Fantastic. And that for me is the version that everyone thinks about. And it's the version I think that's all on all the best ofs as well. When people think about Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day, they by Kiss, they don't think about the version which is a little bit tinny and a bit lame on, and a bit tame actually, on Dress to Kill. They think about the version from Alive. Now, some really good examples of where, you know, the studio versions have not necessarily done that well and not been highly thought of, but the live versions suddenly have propelled it really into the kind of stratosphere, really. So from Frampton's Camel. So this is Peter Frampton, obviously, after he left Humble Pie. We've got one song in here, closest to the album, Do You Feel Like We Do? Now this is 1973, and I think he brought it out as a single. I don't think it did very much. And in 75 he brought out this album, Frampton, which has got Show Me the Way and Baby I Love Your Way, both of which were singles which I don't think did particularly well. Come 1975, late 75, released in 76, we get Frampton Comes Alive. Suddenly those songs become massive hits for him. This is probably, I think, was at the time the best-selling album all time. I think it was beaten by Saturday Night Fever. Now this album, oh, what a debut from the Specials. You know, jam-packed full of really good songs and quite a lot of singles taken off this. And one of the singles from this was Too Much Too Young. But the version on here is not the version they used for the single. And I think when people think about Too Much Too Young, they think about that introduction, Too Much Too Young, and they think about that version. That's the best version. It's slightly quicker, I think it's slightly shorter and better for it. So when people think about that song, they think about the live version. AC/DC from the album If You Want Blood. Now when people think about Whole Lotta Rosie, they probably think about the crowd going Angus, Angus during the riff. Now although I think that's a tremendous version, I actually do think the studio version, which sounds like it's recorded live without a crowd, for me is the definitive version. But I think when people think of A Whole Lotta Rosie, they're probably thinking of that live version with the crowd taking part. And the last one I think is a really good example of this. It's a song that came out on this album. I think is this the second album by Cheap Trick, In Colour. And there's a song on here called I Want You to Want Me, which came out as a single. It was back with a song called Oh Boy, and I don't think it did very well at all. Come 1978, though, when this album came out, it suddenly went stratospheric. It really did. So I Want You to Want Me was the lead single from At the Budokan by Cheap Trick. And on the live version, rather than getting an echo, with crying, the crowd actually take part in that, and it came out as a single and did really well. It's back with Clock Strikes 10, the live version of that, but this is a tremendous version. I think when people think about I Want You to Want Me, they think about the live version, not the studio version. And if you ever want to contrast them, there's a promo that came out in 79 that on one side has got the studio and the other side has got the live, and the live version is absolutely quintessential stuff from Cheap Trick. So there you go. When is the live version better and more well known than the studio? Let me know what you think about that, and let me know what your favourites are from this particular idea. Thanks very much. Cheers.